on the latest wheel, we see that many other Asian economies, Vietnam, India, are all projected to have more than 6% growth. I wonder, do you see there's some kind of rebalance of Asian supply chain going on? And the second question is related to the Russia-Ukraine situation. We see the energy sector is facing a lot of turbulences, which might hinder this green transition to clean energy. I wonder if you think the Asia-Pacific region, especially China, will have a specific role to play in safeguarding this transition. Thank you very much.
So on the supply chain, as we discussed already before, the growing integration of Asia is very visible in the growing trade between Asian economies. And most of that trade really is based on intermediate inputs. So this integration, and we have seen that even under just pre-COVID, that that this is a very fast-growing integration that has financial and that has real aspects. We see this as a way for the lower-income Asian economies to catch up, but it requires that those countries continue on their reform path, which is something that we emphasize in our engagement with them. We see this as a beneficial development, and we would hope that it continues at this stage, with the integration that countries have with China and among them. It is a development that is going on. Maybe I can pass it on to Krishna.
Yeah, so let me just take that question. I think Lekha asked a question at the beginning in terms of when we see supply chains normalizing and so on. So here, I mean, supply chains have been disrupted since 2020, since the beginning of the pandemic. And what we've seen more recently are two things. One is the war in Ukraine, which again led to shortages of commodities and inputs which are integral to supply chains. And second, we saw the rise of COVID outbreaks in China and more frequent and the associated lockdowns. So the sooner you see the war end and the sooner you see the pandemic behind us, the sooner will supply chains normalize. Again, China has an important role to play. China is the largest economy in the region. So there's no question that as things get resolved in China, in terms of the COVID outbreaks and so on, you will see supply chains becoming more normal. But this does not mean that other countries don't have a role to play going forward. You'll see other countries, you've seen countries like Vietnam and Bangladesh becoming part of supply chains, and that trend will continue as global trade continues to gain momentum after the crises are behind us. So on green transition, I think clearly global energy prices have been volatile, most recently because of the war in Ukraine, and it's too early to see to assess whether it's how much of supply and how much of demand factors play a role in this. But as the largest economy in the region and the biggest carbon emitter, China clearly has a major role to play in safeguarding the transition to green energy. Now, that said, in many Asian economies, countries are providing targeted support to protect the vulnerable households from the rise in energy prices. And we welcome that because we want those measures to be temporary and we want those to be targeted to those who are most vulnerable. But going beyond this, the near term, I think over the medium term, what we see, the current events clearly tell you one thing, is there are sufficient incentives right now to move towards renewables, towards clean energy, and also to diversify where you access your energy from. So these are developments which will happen, and we will wait to see how that happens. But China clearly has a role in safeguarding the transition to green energy. So that was the question, I think.